Hi, my name is Jen. I'm an events co-lead for the Manurewa Youth Council, and I'm going to be one of your facilitators alongside Bella, who will introduce herself now.
Kia ora everyone, my name is Bella and I'm a general member on the Manurewa Youth Council. I'm super excited to have you all here today and can't wait to get to know you a bit better. So thank you for joining us.
Just heading into it, we'll get you guys to introduce your name and what party you are running with, but also just a little bit about what your party is, like what it stands for. So we will go alphabetically by first name. So I believe, Arena, that means you're first.
Cool. Lucky to be an A. I'm Arena Williams. I'm Labour's candidate here in Manurewa. I grew up down the road in Takanini. My mum was a local GP in Papakura for as long as I've been alive. My dad was a local councillor under George Hawkins here for many years in Manurewa. So for me, this is a really awesome opportunity to be standing to represent our young, our Māori, our Pacific communities here in Manurewa, everyone who calls Manurewa home is someone I want to connect with, and we're running the kind of community campaign that brings people on board. And I stand for the Labour Party. I want to return Jacinda Ardern's government after October the 17th, because I believe in things like better healthcare investment in Manurewa, better investment in our education system, and a better go for working people.
Ana Lucia Vermont. I'm standing for the Communist League in Manurewa. Our campaign presents a fighting perspective for the working class to organise around in the face of the deepening crisis. And in particular, we think it's important for workers to organise unions in every workplace, and that it's a fighting working class program using our unions to defend the interests of working people. And particularly using those unions to fight for jobs for all of us today. Our unions need to fight for a government-funded public works program to put thousands to work at union scale wages, building the hospitals, schools, housing, mass transportation, childcare, and much more that working people need. It's only through that kind of fighting perspective can we begin to build a party that really speaks and acts to the interests of workers. As we go through those struggles, we gain confidence in ourselves and our ability to run this society. And one of the key things we think is central to that is using our unions to begin to win workers' control of production on the job and see the power that we have as workers in this country. Thank you.
And kia ora tātou, ngā mihi ki ngā kaiwhakarite tēnei rā. My name is Luella Laneka and I'm not with a party, I'm independent. I'm Manurewa born and bred, this is my hometown. I went to Leebank Kindy, Leebank Primary, MI and JC, and I moved back to Manurewa about 16 years ago. So I married my high school best friend from JC and we live in his family house here in Manurewa and my kids go to local schools. So really for me, this was about Manurewa needing its own voice, that if we want changes for Manurewa, then we actually need someone from Rewa to be representing us in Parliament, and it was giving our community a choice about that. I think for me, the big things for me, and having volunteered during both lockdowns for our most vulnerable communities, and in particular our seniors, is that housing is a really big issue in Manurewa. The price of rents, the poor quality of housing has major impacts on health and educational outcomes for our tamariki and for our rangatahi and for whānau. And the other thing is the impacts of poverty. The poor wages, the low wages, what our families are having to struggle with just to make ends meet, let alone trying to do well in a system that is already quite biased against me and Pacific. So I want to make some changes and I want to be a champion, that Manurewa voice for the next 3 years for outcomes for our people. So that's me. Kia ora.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mote Pahulu. I am the candidate for the New Conservative Party. New Conservative Party is not an established party like the Labour Party and the National Party. It's a brand new party. Actually, I have been a big supporter of the Labour Party, but recently switched. Basically, I was led by the very good policies, family policies of the New Conservative. this party is very, very family-friendly party, and I wanted to step up and do something for Manurewa. I have been a good member of the Manurewa community. I've been involved in the high schools, board of trustees. I'm a local JP, and involved with our local church. So I can see people sitting by the roadside here in South Mall asking for money. I can see people sleeping outside. I go to the local church here in Manurewa by the opposite KFC and the Z service station is the Methodist church, and we have a lot of people sleeping outside the veranda of that church. And I don't think it's not a good thing that we tell ourselves that we're advanced society, advanced community, and we've got an MP here in Manurewa, and we're still having those things throughout the Manurewa community. And we have Manurewa people lining up outside Wins at 5 o'clock in the morning. That tells us something is wrong. So I'm happy to stand up and work hard for Manurewa, and whoever wins the Member of Parliament for Manurewa, and I think we need to all back that member so that Manurewa can have an opportunity to thrive.
Awesome. Thank you all for your insight and sharing a little bit about yourself and your background. Next question we're going to move on to is, who is your role model? Someone you look up to, inspires you. So yeah, again, going by alphabetical order. Ardina.
Oh, that's a really nice question. I think my role model is my mum, someone in my life who has really inspired me and been the kind of woman who has always led from the front. She's a local GP and sees in her work, you know, the real need that is in the South Auckland community, but also the beauty of it, the families who have been living in this community for 5 or 6 generations, you know, Māori, Pacific, migrant communities who all have so much to give. And in her work as a health practitioner, she's also seen, you know, some big changes under Labour government and what it means to have a Labour government in South Auckland. You know, things like investment this year of $200 million by Jacinda Ardern's government into the Manukau Super Clinic that is going to change people's lives and change people's health outcomes. You know, having local access to imaging services and breast screening services, for instance, means, you know, so much to local Manurewa women and young women who need those services and don't need to travel all the way over to Middlemore and simply can't get there if you're a young mum with a few little kids. So my mum is definitely the person who for me is a real role model, someone who works, you know, for the betterment of the people and as a community person who, you know, that's the kind of person I want to be too.
Well, I have behind me a book which is called Malcolm X, Black Liberation and the Road to Workers' Power. And I think Malcolm X is an inspirational figure of the Black liberation struggle. He was someone who drew conclusions about the systemic change that is needed in the world, and he organized within the Black community, and he became a leader of the entire working class in trying to confront the system that we face, which maintains both racist oppression but also the exploitation of working people as a whole. So I would say Malcolm X is one of those people I would hold up there.
So a little bit like Ardina, my role model is my dad. So I was brought up by my dad. My dad was a solo parent. He had 3 kids under the age of 5, and he brought us up here in Manurewa with some really good values. He worked his whole life for Ford Motor Company, and he did everything that he could to give us a better start in life. And all of my siblings, and either 3 of us, have gone on to do pretty well in our careers, and that came from a parent that just really wanted us to have more than what he had. And I think it's representative of a lot of parents here in South Auckland, but in my day there were probably a whole lot more opportunities that were available, and it'd be really nice to see other families to be able to do what we've managed to do despite the circumstances. And then I have to say, for my woman role model, I want to say Te Puia Herangi, who was from Tainui, who during World War II, when Māori were really sick and really impoverished, she pulled people together, but she did it through hard work and sheer effort and the relationships she built with everyone to try and make a difference in people's lives. And she looked after a whole lot of tamariki that weren't hers, that were homeless and fosterless, and she just made a huge difference in that landscape. And so those are my two role models.
My role models, I'm not going to say it's my parents. My role model are currently two people that are actually working very, very hard in Manurewa. A guy by the name of Daniel Neiman and a lady called Angela Dalton. Those two has been hard workers within our community here in Manurewa. I was fortunate enough to be with those two, and we started up the Manurewa Action Team in Manurewa here. And that team has been pivotal in everything that is good in Manurewa. And they've been there for probably the last 10 years, and they're still going. They're both in the council, and they're working very hard. And I love them. A lot of improvements, not only with regards to our beaches out in Weymouth, but further around the Manurewa community. You can tell the work that they've done here. It's excellent. Out in Renwick Park area, they've done a lot in the area and then bring it up, and it's a nice area now. They've got a playground and they've got fields, which is, I credit those two, and they working very hard. And I hope whoever's going to be the MP for Manurewa is going to pick up those two and run with it, and Manurewa will be sweet and nice. Thank you.
The next question, I know some of you touched on it in your initial introductions, but just for clarification, why did you decide to run for the role of electorate MP for the Manurewa electorate?
My motivation to stand in Manurewa is that it's, you know, somewhere that I've always been around growing up. It's somewhere that is, you know, the heart of New Zealand, really, that so much happens here in Manurewa that we can be really proud of as all New Zealanders. And it's also a place where COVID-19 has exposed some real need, and there's hard work to be done. I think I'm the person to be able to do that and be a strong voice down in Wellington to make some of those changes happen. You know, I think we have to think as a community around things like how we deal with our 3 prisons in the electorate, and how we think about our pathways to prisons for Māori and Pacific people, especially our youth, and also the pathways out of prison, especially for people who have gone in there young and often put down roots here in Manurewa because they don't have anywhere else where they have links. They don't have their tūranga waiwai. I also want to see better housing and better investment in housing from the government in places like South Auckland, places like Manurewa. I think there is a huge need here. When you see rental prices out of control in Manurewa and out of reach of ordinary working families, you know, something needs to be done, and I would really like to be that person and that consistent voice here in Manurewa. As a, you know, a young mum, I think I can relate to a lot of the struggles that people are going through here, being time poor, not having, you know, the time to really connect with your whānau and your broader support networks. You do need a little bit of extra help and a little bit of support from the community around you, and I think, you know, I can be a person to help with that.
So I've been working in factories in the Manurewa electorate for probably close to a decade. I won't list all the places I work, but so I've been a part of unions in the district, and part of seeing the reality, being part of the reality of what it's like to work on and try and pay your rent on minimum wage, and the need for us to be able to organise, come together and fight. And I think Manurewa is a really diverse population, and we've got to find roads to build unity, because it's only in unity that we'll get real struggle to try to really transform the unions into something that can fight. I mean, I've been a member of the first union and E2 union. Currently, the place where I work doesn't have a union, and it's something I'm trying to work with my workmates to discuss with them why we need a union and what a union can begin to become. You know, that it's really the place where I think we can make that kind of change and present the kind of example. There's an example I want to point to. It's been featured in our newspaper recently of grocery store workers in Canada who've been out on strike non-stop for more than a month to fight for permanent jobs and decent wages. And the increased casualisation of work in all sorts of workplaces and is creating, you know, much more uncertainty for so many people to be able to pay our bills or whatever else. So, you know, that's why, you know, I very much wanted to be part of bringing the community where I live into building and strengthening and building a political movement that can change things.
Thank you. Luella?
Kia ora no. So many reasons I'm standing, and the first one, which I did say at the beginning, was Manurewa needs to own its own narrative. We have an awesome community. We've got awesome solutions to a lot of the challenges that we have, but we need to own that narrative ourselves and not let others speak on our behalf. So I feel like we need someone from Rewa to be our advocate there the whole time. The House of Representatives is about representation, and I believe representation should be local representation. It should be local people invested in the community, committed to the community, that have demonstrated that they are there and happy to be held accountable 24/7. So that's big for me. We have the solutions here in Manurewa. We're often not enabled to be able to be part of the solution making. Government comes in with these solutions and they are put onto the community and they don't work for our community. So those lines that Mote talked about at Work and Income at 5 in the morning, I talked to a lot of the people that are in those lines, and there's nothing else for them. They go cap in hand to Work and Income for what they think they need. And Work and Income makes it a little bit harder with a whole lot of hurdles for them to jump through. Clothing for their kids in winter time. And some of the things that I've learned, so I've worked in policy and strategy my whole career. Some of the things I learned working with our whānau was that these families have to pay back that clothing money that they get given for their kids. So our system is putting our people into debt. And on top of that debt, they've got that debt, they can't even make ends meet with the cost of housing. So I just think if Manurewa pulled together, which we are doing, but we had our own voice in Parliament, then we can make some amazing changes for our community by owning the narrative, by being part of the solutions, and by looking at what the challenges are and being resourced to come up with the solutions ourselves.
Tautoko to you, Luella. Everything you're saying is absolutely beautiful, and I wish Manurewa as everything that you've just said. Many reasons for standing. I've been working very hard in this community for close to 40 years now, and I'm a local JP, and I've seen people, over 1,000 people every year, either signing documents, doing declaration, or just giving advice. And a lot of people that I come across, high rent is absolutely damaging. The house in front of me, their rent is $700 a week, and there's only one person working. And I can't work out how the landlord can sit back and enjoy $700 and some other family is suffering. And I reckon that the Parliament needs to do something for the people, and that's not just one person, and it's right throughout the Manurewa community, right throughout South Auckland. And we need to come together as a community. The New Conservative Party is a family-friendly party, and a lot of issues that is bandied about in the media, that Manurewa is probably one of the worst suburbs in South Auckland. It's not. And the reason why we have all these issues because of the breakdown in family. The biggest problem is breakdown in family. Suicide, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and all those issues are because our family foundation is broken. And we need to fix that first before we move on. And I want it to be a part of fixing those problems in our community. And I know Manurewa, and I've been working in this community for a long time. Thank you.
Cool, thank you everyone. It was good to hear the different visions you all have for the community and the similarities between a lot of those. I'm just moving on to our next question. How exactly do you plan, or some physical actions you might take to actually represent our community?
So you're talking about concrete issues that we as candidates might bring as the MP, right? Gotcha. Well, that's an interesting question. I've been talking to a lot of people in the community about, legislative change that they would like to see. I've touched on this a little bit before, but, an interesting issue has come up in Weymouth around one of the Oranga Tamariki facilities there called Whakataka Pōkai, which is a youth facility in the community, which is opposed by many of the residents there for a number of reasons. I think what I would want to do as a local MP is get into the community and really understand some of those concerns around why, the community is feeling like there hasn't been consultation there. As youth leaders yourselves and with the Manurewa Youth Council, I would be really interested in hearing your views around having a facility like that, because it sort of cuts both ways. Some would say that having a youth facility like Whakataka Pōkai in our community means that some of the users there don't have to leave our communities and are closer to their families. But some would say that it's not safe to have it there because, it's in a residential area and, little kids live in that area and there are safety concerns with the residents. I've met with the Residents Association, I've met with submitters in the Environment Court, and that is something that I would do pretty urgently, is get into the community and really understand some of those issues, really listen to people's concerns, and especially our young people. Another thing I'm sort of interested in that space is a new offence that I would see as possibly subject matter of a member's bill, which would be an offence to do with unlawful sexual connection with someone in detainment or custody. You see some of these high-profile cases overseas of people who are in custody, and it's not a special offence for offending of, say, a prison officer or someone with custody over that person to have a sexual connection with them, and I think that it should be its own offence.
One of the things I was able to join earlier in the year was the massive march in Queen Street around Black Lives Matter, which was a march against racist justice policies and racist police practices in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And people came out in their tens of thousands, and this is an issue that affects the Manurewa electorate, and through that action we could see what it means when we come together and we have our voice heard, because pretty rapidly after that the police backed off having armed patrols in our community, and this was a completely outrageous trial. It had no community consent, and all it did was target the particularly Māori and Pacifica community. That I've already touched on how I see I don't see this election about what I can do for anyone. It's about how we can begin to organise together to fight. And our program is about putting forward some ideas to fight around. And I've already mentioned jobs, and I just want to mention the whole question of amnesty for overstayers. Because right now there are a lot of migrant workers in Manurewa and throughout the country who are having a really hard time because of the whole question of the status of their visas. I know the government's made some concessions just in the last few weeks, but it's still an enormous question, and I think all migrants should have the same rights as New Zealand citizens on economic and social policy, because without that we're divided against each other, and we need to be united in fighting for what we need, because we're a class divided society and the working class needs to organise together to fight for our interests. Thank you.
One of the big things that I'd like to change when I'm the Member of Parliament for Manurewa is to push the government to introduce a capital gains tax. I think for two reasons. One, it's fueling the speculation in the housing market, which is increasing the cost of housing, which is then increasing the cost of rents, which has a very real impact on families here in Manurewa. And the other thing that it does is it means that lots of workers in Manurewa whose every single cent they earn, every single dollar they earn is taxed. As soon as you get to a certain level of wealth and you're able to buy a house, all of a sudden you don't have to pay taxes, and there's a real inherent unfairness in that. So that will be one of the big things I'd champion. The second one I'd champion is the impacts of poverty, that all families in New Zealand, and particularly in Manurewa, have a universal level of income that everyone gets. Because if our children and our rangatahi are our future, and the impacts of poverty are impacting on their future, one way we can counter that is by increasing the amount of money that goes to families. And in Manurewa working income, the amount of money that's spent on emergency food grants, emergency housing, clothing grants, all of these things, if that actually just became part of what was the basic amount of money that everyone had, that might help families to then make the choices that they need to make. The other thing I'd look at doing is so billions of dollars comes into South Auckland from the government, and we're still having the issues. In fact, some of the issues are getting worse. What I'd like to do is refocus and re-siphon some of that money to the organisations in Manurewa that are making a real difference in people's lives, rather than the organisations that know how to tick the boxes, that meet all the metrics, that aren't metrics that work for our families. Like 10 people have been through the door, but you haven't fixed any one of them. So maybe the metrics needs to be, this family no longer needs X, Y, and Z because of the work that we've done. So those are some of the things that I'd like to champion as soon as I got in. Kia ora.
Just reiterate a couple of things that Luella touched on. One was the tax. The party that I represent, the New Conservative, we've got a couple of very good tax policies, which is the first $20,000 of earnings will be tax-free, which is very, very relevant to South Auckland families. And then there's also something called income splitting, which none of the parties now is doing or introduced into the tax system. Income splitting as one income in a family, say 70,000, and the mum is staying home, look after the kids, then 70,000 and split between the wife and the person who's working, then they have $35,000 each. Well, when they get the $35,000 each, they are grouped as low income, and they'll be entitled to low income privileges for all the good things that the low income people get from being in so little. Another thing that I wanna see improved, Irina touched on, is we've got a couple of prisons here in Manurewa, and prisons is populated by Pacific Island and Māori. And Māori say 15% of the population, but they make up a hell of a lot of percentage of the people that populate the prison. So when you go to prison, and not only to serve your sentence, but it's also to educate yourself, getting ready to come out and reintegrate to society. So our policy is based on rehabilitation. There are 3 stages. You go in and you work in the prison, and if you work very well, and then you move up to another stage where you educate and you do trade like plumbers or electrician. And then if you're very good and you still have to work out your time in prison, and you've got a job outside, you can go outside and work and then go back to prison. It's an open sentence. So those 3 stages, I think it will bring up the standard of the people who goes in. They come out better people to integrate to society.
Little bit of a more relaxed question. What's your favorite place to eat in Manurewa? Because we all know food is important. We love food. So what we want to know, what's your guys' favorite place to eat in Manurewa, and you have to pick one.
Can I go at the end? I gotta cycle through my faves.
Okay,
Yeah.
Ana Lucia, we'll start with you then, just keeping the alphabetical order.
Flame Grill on the corner of Cavendish and Great South.
Oh, 100%. Luala?
Poe, without a doubt, hands down Poe.
Mote?
Well, there's a little place by Lambie Drive called Cosmos. There's a little cafe there. Me and the wife go there every Saturday morning, and there's a beautiful little place, nice and cheap. And the other place is inside the mall is a little sushi shop by just the entry, southern side of the entry. There's a little Japanese sushi shop there. I go there all the time. It's lovely. I love it. I don't get to cook too much here, and when we don't cook, we go to the sushi place or we go to Cosmos on a weekend.
No.
Beautiful.
I'm sorry, I'm stalling like a typical politician, but it's very hard to choose. I'm a real foodie. Anyone who gets to know me, come around to my house, I'm cooking or we're going out to eat. I'm going to say Faux Kitchen, just because it's just down the road from my house. And it's the best spot to take people and to have a big party of guests.
Excellent.
Thank you guys for that. Just a note to anyone that will watch this, if you guys want to go check out any of those places, you're more than welcome to. And yeah,
because as youth, often we feel there's just a massive disconnect between us and, you know, the high levels of government. And, you know, engaging youth with politics and civics education is something so important. So our next question is, how do you specifically plan on engaging with our youth and closing that disconnect?
That is a great question. I think I would like to start with the importance of reaching out to schools in this Manurewa electorate. We have some really great schools and some incredible leaders within our schools who are doing amazing work in the community. So I would say that was a starting point for me. I've already been building some of those relationships with the principals in the area, also the teachers. But for me, that's a long-term project, right? Building up those relationships is going to be key. Labor has introduced some policies which are specific to schools and I think are going to be really important for Manurewa. Things like nurses in primary schools up to decile 5 have been extended. Things like the Mana Ake program, which provides mental health and wellbeing programs in high schools. It's those things that I want to check in with school leaders and see how those are going for our young people, how they're being experienced and how they're supporting teachers to do the really important work of educating but also supporting our students through those years. Then there's the second piece, which is what do you do after school? Because we know with especially our Māori and Pacific youth, but many young people in Manurewa, they lose touch with their school and then, you know, they're not necessarily in education. So there's this big question mark about what's for me and what's next, especially when, you know, in these uncertain times with the job market, it seems really daunting to get into work. So I'm really proud that Labor has made trades training free for the first year. I think that's a really important thing for our Manurewa young people to be able to get into good, well-paid work that's skilled and, you know, allows them to support their whānau and their whānau in the future. And for me, getting alongside those trades training institutions, understanding what young people are studying in the area, and also touching base with the universities in this electorate is key for me.
My experience has been that young people are very political and the issues that engage them. Parliament doesn't engage them because Parliament largely ignores them. So I mentioned the Black Lives Matter protest. This was organised and led by young people. I was part of protests before the abortion law reform was finally put through, which was organised and led by young people. You know, fighting to defend and advance women's rights, fighting against racist practices. I know that high schools in Otahu, for example, organised something around Black Lives Matter, which then got sort of transformed into a thing about, you know, opposing violence between school students. But I think the whole question is that actually young people are very political, and it's a question of drawing them into discussing how can we fight and win. And because we are seeing thousands and thousands of young people engaging in political actions right now. Right now, for example, across North America, there have been tens of thousands of people out in the street, mostly led by young people. In Europe, in Belarus, led by young people. In Lebanon, protests around the corruption of their government, led by young people. So I have a complete confidence in youth and their ability to organise and fight. And what I want to point them to is the power of unions, the working class, to bring about change. And, you know, I think that's the thing, is to sort of see that we, through our organised unity, that we can bring about change, that we don't have to just accept the way that this system treats us as working people. Basically, we have a system that defends the profits of big business, and that's always the priority in this system. And the only time the interests of working people are put forward are when we stand up and when we say it's time. Thank you.
Yeah, first port of call would be the Manurewa Youth Council. You guys are pretty awesome and you're quite representative of the demographic, but I also feel like there's a lot of rangatahi that aren't connected in or don't know how to be connected in, and I think that's where my current community networks, through the sports clubs, through a whole range of things, through the church youth groups, Te Kahua Te Rangatahi, all of those groups, there are some amazing rangatahi here, and it's not that they don't want to be involved, often their lives are just so busy that they don't have time. So I think it's on us to be the ones that make that happen rather than letting rangatahi come to us. The other thing too is going a little bit further back. It doesn't take long before a 10-year-old's a rangatahi or a youth. So how do we start to involve them a lot sooner so that, you know, we're understanding from almost a pipeline of what the issues are from childhood through to rangatahi, through to, and in my head, rangatahi is 35, but I'm focusing on the 17 to 25 lot, that how do we understand what it is they need? Actually, I'd like to step out of the role and let them become the MP, because I think that's the way to go. And maybe one of the ways that we can do that is to have a youth come with the MP on a number of occasions in a rotating kind of position where they start to learn the ingoings and outgoings of Parliament, not just those that are chosen as the MPs for part of youth Parliament, but exposing more of our rangatahi to the goings on so that they can then go back to the community and have a voice in their voice about what that might look like going forward.
I reckon we're lucky in Manurewa that we've got a youth council. I'm not too sure whether the other electorates have got a youth council, but Manurewa has got a very good youth council, and we need to keep that going. There was some talk recently about to get the 16-year-old to vote, and I really support that. I mean, 16-year-old can drive, and 16-year-old can do other things. And I think most 16-year-olds now are fully aware of what's going on in Parliament, and they need to be a lot more politically involved. When I finished high school, I haven't got a clue what was going on in Parliament, but now I can see, if you can have a look at Parliament now, there's a lot of younger people there now. And if Arena is going to go in, she's young, so I think that the system is slowly getting younger, because the schools, I think that schools should adopt into their curriculum politics, because when you come out, you're 16-year-old and you need to vote. Research says that those who do not vote in society are the university students and Pacific Islanders and Māori. So university students are now very politically aware. So there's a need to adopt that into the curriculum at school, start at an early age, so that we're all aware. And one thing that Arena touched on is the trade training. I mean, our school, probably half of the school population likes academia, but the other half, they don't like it, they hate it, and they like trade training. I reckon they should be pull out, start early their training, learn how to use tools, get their driver's license, and as soon as they finish year 13, no, they don't go to university, but they go into apprentices. That way we can have a lot of of people who work outside, not inside the offices. We bring in thousands and thousands of skilled migrants from overseas, and we've got people sitting, able-bodied people sitting on a dole. It doesn't make sense. So what Arena says that we need to have a lot more concentration on trades rather than training to be lawyers and doctors and all those academic subjects. Thank you.
Okay, sweet. So the next question is more about you guys and your campaign. So this question is, what has been one of or the most memorable moment of your campaign so far?
I had a really memorable moment before the second lockdown. We're out door knocking and it was Cook Island Language Week. And we found a Cook Island speaking household who we could celebrate with. And we realised on the electoral roll that no one in the household was enrolled to vote. In fact, no one had ever been enrolled in their household to vote. So we were able to sign up every single person for the first time and to go through the, how to vote, where to vote. And for me, that's a really exciting thing. And there was one guy who was turning 18 before the election. And so to be able to have that conversation with him, to relate on the level of a young person myself, was really, really special. And I think, you get involved as a young person in politics, not because I think often you support any particular policy, but because you really believe in our democracy. And you really believe in the strength of civic involvement. That's certainly my story. I got involved when I was 16 as a flyer dropper and a door knocker in South Auckland. I stood behind the politicians who I saw as making a difference. And an issue that was really important to me is the foreshore and seabed for Māori people. And so I backed my local Labour MPs who I saw as standing with the party who had always represented Māori, but also wanted to change it from the inside because I'm a progressive. And so to kind of be able to have that conversation with a young man who was looking at politics and had never been involved and had never voted, about why he should vote and how he could vote and how he could exercise his vote in whatever way he wanted, was really special to me.
One of the key moments for me was actually joining the picket line of Temper Zone workers in Manurewa, which included many people who live in Manurewa. Temper Zone is a workplace of some 400 people. It was 600. They'd made a lot of people redundant, and during the course of the lockdown, they basically stole the annual leave of most of their workers. So the union organised protest pickets outside, and that drew enormous support from the community as people want to see our conditions of work and life protected. And people are inspired when they see people begin to organise a fight. And I thought that was a really important example. And just discussing with people on the protest picket that we're then organising this campaign to try and put forward a platform for people to organise a fight around. And I just want to mention, just campaigning door to door has been the centre of our campaign, and just the real hardship that people are describing in terms of the people losing hours of work, people, the incomes go down, but the bills don't. So one of the things we've been raising is using our unions to fight for a shorter work week, to share the work available without having a cut in pay. And that got a real resonance. I know, like at one point, it was like 5 doors in a row where people's incomes had massive hits. And just trying to discuss how can we begin to confront this crisis and defend our interests. Thank you.
What's memorable is the smile on people's faces when I knock on their door, and they're really welcoming. The first one's like, "Oh, who are you?" And then one lady, she was upright front about it. She says, "Are you with the Mormons or the Jehovah's Witnesses?" And I said, "I'm not, I'm talking about elections." And she just beamed. And that just seems to be, everyone's engaged and they want to engage. And it's been really lovely meeting lots of people in the wider Manurewa electorate. That's been really interesting. And I've loved that because it kind of fuels me that people are engaged in this. one of the other memorable things was actually driving the area. That's the new Manurewa Electorate, and it's massive, and half of Manurewa is not in it. And people in Old Papatoetoe are saying, oh, I'm part of Manurewa. And so having that engaged conversation has been really interesting too. But one of the other things, the hardship that Ana Lucia talked about, was I've seen people, cold houses, no food, and being able to go in. So I often bubble wrap people's windows. That's just something I do on my own with my friends. And so saying to them, look, I can bubble wrap your windows if your house is cold, and I'll come back when the lockdown's over. So helping people with that, but then also coming back with food when I know that they need food parcels as well, because I've got a lot of different organisations that I can pull on to be able to get food parcels to those families in need. But just being able to see the reality day to day and finding people who don't normally engage, who might not be able to reach some of these services, that's been memorable as well.
Thank you. Well done, Luella. Maybe I'll vote for you.
Yes, please.
You got one vote. The campaign is going very well. As you said, Luella, Manurewa now extend out to Papatoe, and it's hard to think that Manurewa is way out to Papatoe, and I haven't been out to Papatoe and do any campaign, but I think I got 2 or 3 billboards out that way.
You've got great billboard positioning.
Yeah. Door knocking. I haven't got very many helpers, but when they can, most of them are working, and when they can, they help. But at the moment, I've suspended the door knocking when the level 3 happened. But I've now started to go out. Got some new flyers to distribute. Went out past Palmer's Road by the beach there. There's beautiful homes around that area. Massive. But someone shut the door in my face when I was door knocking, but just move on to the next door. So yeah, it's going well, and I'm trying my best to hopefully make a dent on Arena, but Arena is quite strong campaigning team there. So all the best to you all with the campaign. It's going well.
As a couple of you have mentioned, half of Manurewa doesn't actually fall within the Manurewa electorate. We have multiple electorates in the Manurewa area. There's the Takanini electorate, and of course the other ones. We're actually doing a similar thing that we've done with you guys, getting you guys in because you are the candidates for the Manurewa electorate. We're doing a similar thing with the candidates for the Takanini electorate, so that will be around as well. And I'll hand you guys back over to Bella for the next question.
So obviously with COVID, it's affected the whole world, it's affected New Zealand, but especially our South Auckland community and especially our South Auckland youth. So if elected, how do you plan to deal with that uncertainty that COVID brings to a lot of our youth that have had to drop out of school to support their families, and also just missing out on a lot of those co-curricular activities that bring a lot of, joy and happiness to our community?
I want to start by saying that I too have been door knocking. Before the second lockdown, we were door knocking every day. And what we're seeing out in the community, I think all of us know how real the need is out there in Manurewa, but it's not new. COVID has exposed what has always been there. And so I'm really proud to stand with Labour this year after supporting 1.7 million people in New Zealand on the wage subsidy. Things like that make a real difference in Manurewa, and we're not seeing the incredible hardships that people overseas are experiencing. And that's the kind of leadership that I want for the team going forward. I want a leader like Jacinda Ardern who has compassion for people in the forefront of her mind when she's making those kinds of decisions. I'm also proud that Labour has continued on with our families package, and that families package has made about 300,000 families on average $75 off, better off a week. And that kind of thing makes a huge difference to those youth. That $75 might not seem a lot if you live in, central Epsom, but it is a huge deal to our Manurewa families, and for many mums, especially single mums, it makes a difference between having kai on the table on a Monday or not. So those are the things that, I've been campaigning on, and are the reason that I get out of bed in the morning and want to talk to people about why they should be voting in the September election. And I will continue to be advocating for those things during our COVID health response and in the wake of the economic crisis.
I agree with Irina that COVID isn't the only cause of the crisis. In fact, the sort of growing casualisation, unemployment were issues that we were confronting pre-COVID, and that they've been accelerated by the current crisis. And the importance of beginning to organise, because you're right, what you mentioned in your question about isolation is a completely demoralising and disempowering thing. And, the importance of us coming together in solidarity. I think it was one of the reasons why the Black Lives Matter march got such a huge response. It was people wanted to come together and have a voice. And when you see 10,000 people in Queen Street, that's quite a powerful thing. And I think that that's exactly what we need to sort of do more of to begin to address this crisis, because it's not going away. It's not going away anytime soon. And we have a government and a system that will continue to start with the interest of business. The government's given billions of dollars to business in this country, but working people, we are bearing the brunt of the crisis, and that includes young people. And I just say, join the fight, because it's in the fight that we will change it. And I think young people are inspired by a fight. We saw that at Ihumātao, when tens of thousands of people went to Ihumātao to stop that development and protect the land. And I think that that's what people want to be inspired by, and it's the road forward. Thank you.
So I agree, COVID has exposed some problems that already existed and actually has amplified them. But I also think that COVID presents a bit of an opportunity too. So two things, I think with the NCEA and students having to give up school to work to put food on the table for their families, I like something that Philly said a while ago, that those students should get credits for the work that they're doing because they're actually learning real life skills while they're working. And I think that will be a good way to start to change what's happened this year, because we can't go back, and they can't go back to school at this point in time, so we need to do something different. The other thing that some friends of mine, and we call ourselves the Fire Brigade, as in Māori fire, not F-I-R-E, is we've organised ourselves so that if youth at high school do need support to be driven somewhere, some tutoring with certain subjects, that we've come together to be able to offer that to the youth. And one of the things that has come through some of the reports that have been done is that youth tend to, in South Auckland, end up in jobs that pay $20,000 a year. It's half the minimum wage. And so how do we use what's happened with COVID, the opportunities to get our youth into careers that are actually going to help them financially to make good money going forward? And one of the things I've talked about lots is in Māoridom, we talk about being a tutu or a haututu, and that was something we were growled at when I was young, but actually it's where technology and that Māori skill come together, and it's a Pacific skill. How do we start to ramp up and leverage that? Because at the moment only 3 to 4% of Pacific and Māori are in the tech sector, and I think that's a great space for our rangatahi to be. And so I think there's some great opportunities around that, and also self-employment. There's been some rangatahi. There was one particular young woman who was making homemade soaps, and because of COVID, she had all of these online orders, and now she can employ 3 staff. So I think let's shift the dial. Let's not do what we continued to do before that hasn't worked for us. Let's look to the new opportunities that are out there, and let's get government to resource that to happen.
Right, this COVID-19 has been devastating all throughout the world, and is unprecedented. Nothing has happened like this in the past, and every government in every country is new to this, and I must congratulate our Prime Minister. She is a hero. She's done very, very well, and I think her government has supported her very well. The only thing that I can see with this disease that I think we're going towards eliminating the disease, but it's very hard to eliminate the disease while it's rampant throughout the world. And I think we can change its strategy maybe so that our businesses and our school children can go back to school, our business can go back, by just put our energy into minimizing the effect of the disease on the population, but allow our economy to take over. Our young children that sits NCEA, I feel sorry for them because they miss out probably more than half of their school year now, and it's probably a good idea for those who stay back and help mum and dad. They go to work to just help out and put food on the table. That is life skill, and it is priceless. And I reckon they should be given some credit for those skills. When they come out of school, they become adults, and that will never be forgotten. The time that they spend helping mum and dad will never ever forget that. So I'm all with giving them credits for the time that they lost during the year.
I know it's been touched on a little bit earlier, so we'll see if we can go a little more rapid fire. What is one specific thing you want to target if elected as MP?
Manukau Super Clinic. I believe that should be a hospital functioning for our local people as somewhere where we can go to access more healthcare services, and we can have our local healthcare workers based there.
Jobs for all. I think the divisions between employed and unemployed, the divisions between employed and unemployed are one of the key divisions we're facing right now. And the bosses are using the high levels of unemployment to increase speed on the line, make us work harder, faster for less. And we all have a stake in fighting for jobs for everyone, whether you're New Zealand born or a migrant worker, ensuring that we all have well-paid, decent jobs. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It takes no imagination to look around our neighbourhoods to see the work that needs to be done. We could all be easily, usefully employed to do that work. And I think we need to use our unions to wage a fight for a real government public works program that can put us all to work immediately. Thank you.
Kia ora. So mine's housing. 3 things in housing: capital gains tax, to stop the speculation in the housing market, a housing warrant of fitness, so our houses here in Manurewa are suitable for people to actually live in and not cold and mouldy, and then putting the accommodation allowance into people's benefit so that people have that money. It's not going direct, like the government's not subsidising landlords' own private pockets, but actually the residents of Manurewa are able to choose with that money to be able to live where they want to live. So housing's big for me.
Yeah, I support what Luella says. I can't believe there are thousands of people housed in motels, and the government is spending millions every week just to pay motels to house these people, because there's no shortages of houses, and we need to build more houses, more social housing, and make them warm, like what Luella was saying. And the other thing is employment. We need to up the trade and the education on that side instead of academic, and get our youth into employment. About 10, 20 years ago, there was talk about getting a town hall for Manurewa. and we were going to push for it when I was with the action team, and the Manukau City Council had a share in the airport, and then as soon as we started to move that way, Super City came on board and they took everything away, and we had no resources. But it'll be lovely if Manurewa have a town hall by the library where everybody can use it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear these things, and it's really good to hear. Part of the reason why we did so rapid, like that one so rapid fire, was just so we could really get more of a gauge of your guys, like where your guys' passions are and your special little passion projects. So that was really beautiful to hear. Thank you all for that, and we'll hand you back over to Bella.
Yeah, cool. Just kind of going off that question, if there was one event you could host in Manurewa, you know, no budget constraints or anything like that, what would it be?
I would host our first National Matariki Day. You will have seen that Labour has announced that Matariki will be a public holiday, and I would vie for the chance to hold that because I think our Māori community in Manurewa is so incredibly vibrant. We have so much to offer as Māori in Manurewa, and to be able to host that with the PM, with the government officials, but also with some special guests from the Pacific who also celebrate those traditions of voyaging and the stars would just be an absolute delight.
Okay, so I mean, I would use the office if I was elected in Manurewa to draw together any union struggles in the area, to bring both union members and non-union members, youth organisations and others, to figure out how we can come together to fight for the kind of program that we need. So, you know, using those resources to facilitate that kind of discussion and to aid struggles that are going on. I know, for example, I met one guy door to door where the 13 co-workers had just recently joined the union because their boss had told them that to train new workers, but they were paying them less than the new workers they'd hired. So they were like, well, that's just plainly not right. We're the trainers and we're being paid less. So they thought to join the union. So, but then how do we use that to take the next steps on the big social questions that we face, like housing, like healthcare, you know, to advance that fight. So really to use the office of Member of Parliament to draw people into that fight. Thank you.
That's a hard question, and I like to say I think your answer, Arina, was great. I think for me, the thing that draws people together is food, and the way you build relationships is by coming together with food. So I'd like to hold some kind of multiple events, street corner parties, where we fund locals on their streets to hold a big feed that invites everybody on that street to come together to get to know each other. One of the things that we do know is the closer you live, the more isolated you feel. And so getting people out of their houses and mingling and getting to know each other and it being paid for, and we can bring in some of our Manurewa musicians, arija, all of those to come along to the different events, that would be great and build on what we already have here.
Very good.
Oh, that sounds really exciting. Nice and young too. What's it?
Yeah, I support what Arina was saying. Matariki, it's a new now a holiday. Is that right, Arina? It's now a state holiday. That will be a coming together point for the community, and maybe expand that we get together every year close to Christmas. It's the Christmas in the Park in Manurewa. Make that a huge thing so that everybody can come together and enjoy the end of the day, end of the year, Christmas at the Park and Matariki.
As Bella said, that was our last question for you guys. Just thank you so much for actually taking the time to come and speak with us and take the time out of your campaigns. Good luck to all of you and all of the other candidates that couldn't be here.